unmute myself. Welcome to our third installment of the Craft of Code. Today, we're going to be going over Postman, which is a application that helps you test out HTTP requests, as well as test out APIs and see what kind of data you're getting back from them. And you can, if you're building your own API, you can also test that using Postman. So a really helpful tool. I can almost guarantee you're going to be going back to this over and over again. As always, there is a GitHub repo, which you can do later if you would like. So I'll post that in the Slack right now. Shop or follow this GitHub. So I've posted the link to the GitHub in the Slack, and you'll see that along the left side of my screen over here as we go through it. So over here is Postman. It has a desktop client. You can also log into it via the web. I'm going to use the desktop client for this. The first thing you have to do is you have to create a workspace. Everything that you happens inside of a workspace. I've already got one ready for this, but if not, you can just do new workspace and it'll ask you for a name and what teams. I usually just do personal. And then I'd say test workshop workspace. So create the workspace. And again, I've already got a workspace set up for this, so we're going to change over to that real quick. This is Postman. Inside your workspace, there are kind of various options. We'll go through a lot of them later, but the most basic thing you're going to want to do is create requests, and all requests have to happen in collections. I've got two collections here, the basics and the Pokemon one. These are kind of finished products of the workshop. But if you hit new here, you'll get a bunch of options and you can create a new collection. So for this repo, there's a little test server that I've created, and I've got that running already over here. So I did follow the instructions on the repo to get that set up. And it is listening on localhost 3000. So let's start by making our first GET request. So we've got a new collection. Inside of this collection, we can add a request. Postman will make a request for us. Now, we're going to want to test the endpoint here, which is API/Pokemon. But first, you have to remember to specify the host as well. So in our case, that is HTTP localhost 3000. So we'll paste that in there as well. So now we've told Postman where to send the request. We've told it what verb we're using. Here you can choose the various different HTTP methods that are available. And we can go ahead and send that request. And there we can see that we've gotten a list of Pokemon. Here, the bottom part is going to display the various, whatever you're getting back from the request, and there's various tabs. You can see the body, and this knows it's JSON, so it'll format that for you. You can also see cookies and any headers if that's applicable, and any test results if those are applicable if you've written tests for a route. So let's make a couple more routes here. So first thing we're going to do here is that this API also can accept a number as a path variable. So when you do this little colon up here, it automatically creates a path variable for you here that you can then change and ask it for whatever number you put in here. And you might be wondering, like, oh, where do you get that information? That's all going to be in the documentation of the API. I happen to know this one because I created it. But for example, GitHub, they've got some great documentation about their API, and you can see things like, what the endpoints are, what the different arguments are that it accepts, and where you have to put them. So if you put in the header or the path. So in our example now, we've added a path variable called number. Postman is smart enough to know that that's a variable, so it adds it down here. That's also, in this case, optional. If you just do nothing, it'll send you back a list of all the Pokemon. Great. Up here, you've also got a couple of different places where you can put stuff, and we're going to go over here to my completed requests, so I don't have to retype everything. But we've got an example of a delete request. We've changed the method here from the dropdown to be delete. And again, you see the path variable. Going back to the get variable, another common way to send information is with a query parameter. And I happen to know this API accepts a query parameter of type, which we can use to get Pokemon only of the specified type. And you can see that Postman will put that right into the URL for you. Apparently there are no dragon Pokemon. There we go. Let's try that. Oh, maybe I misspelled it. Might need to be capitalized. There we are. Now we've got some dragon Pokemon. Now, another super cool thing about Postman that a lot of people may not have noticed is over here, there's a little code area. If you click that, it will give you the code that you need to write an HTTP request in a whole bunch of different languages and using different libraries. So Axios is a pretty common one that we use here. This isn't exactly how I would probably write one, but it gives you all the right information and it kind of tells you how to use the library. And in a pinch, you could basically just copy and paste this into your code somewhere with a little modification. So that's very cool. Great. So we've got a delete request. That one works very similar to the get request. What I wanted to show you is a post request because the post request has a body. So in the body tab, so you can add whatever body you're going to add to your request. And for the most part in this course, you're going to be sending JSON information. So you're going to want to select raw. And then from the dropdown, you're going to want to tell it it's JSON. And that will automatically, in the header, add the content type as application JSON. So we can send this, and there we see that we've added the Pokemon Natamon. Same thing with put. You're going to need to use the body, do the same thing. Awesome. So now let's add some authentication. Our server has some authentication. I just have to uncomment this line of code. And if we now make a GET request, we should get denied. Invalid API key. Makes sense. There's no API key. We can go over to the authorization and we can do, sorry, let me look through here what exactly I set it as. I think it's just API key. And we do API key. And in the value field, I have to enter, oh, I did that backwards. So again, this is something you have to look up in the documentation to know exactly what you've got to do. So here's our API key. And we'll add that into the value. So now this request should have as an additional authentication header. We can save that and we can send. Oh, and I did it wrong for some reason. Let me just go over and show you, there's actually a better method, which is that you can add this to your collection instead of adding it to a specific request. And I've done that already over here in the finished Pokemon. So if you set it to the authentication on the collection, on each request, you can then just tell it to inherit that from its parent. So here in the finished Pokemon collection, I've got the authentication set as API key, and then the key is API key. Again, that's from the documentation that you'd have to look up. And then here you're seeing a little bit of funny syntax. So Postman can save environment variables, and this is how you call those environment variables. Why is that helpful? Well, you may at some point be testing both like a local copy of your database and a deployed copy of your database. And it can be really annoying to have to change various things on there. So I've got a local one and I've got a deployed environment. And if we look at these, you can see that what are we in the deployed environment? We have an API key variable, as well as in the local environment. And that has a different one. And you refer to it using this double curly brackets. So it's going to insert that right into this slot. Really easy to make these. If you just do edit, that might just edit it. Sorry, Zoom's in the way. If you do new over here, you can create a new environment, name it whatever you want, add whatever variables you want, and then you'll be able to switch between those very easily. So let's, come on, Zoom out of the way. Let's go back over to our Pokemon over here. So this is a request and we can send it to local. You can also see that I've made a host variable because I've got different hosts for the deployed. If I select deployed, if I hover over host, it's going to show you the host path to go to my deployed version, which I've got running on Heroku. So let's do the local one. We'll just do get Pokemon. And you can see now that it has in fact given us all of our Pokemon in our database, and the authentication header was added. So we were able to get past the validation. Wondering how I can make this smaller. There we go. I don't know if you can see me futzing with the Zoom thing on the screen, but it's super in the way. Okay. So that's variables. They're super handy. It's also good because if you had to like hard code your API keys into any of these requests and you were to share this with other people on your team, then everyone would have access to your token, which might not be ideal, especially if you're in a big team, you don't know who would be accessing it. And it just makes it so convenient to be able to come up here and say, okay, now let's test the deployed one and just hit send. This might take a second because Heroku might need to wake back up. Maybe Heroku's still not quite up and running. But the point being, with the environment variables, you can target a different place super easily. Next, we'll talk about testing really quick. I wish somebody had walked me through really quick how to add a test to something. So in here, there's a tests side, and literally it is as easy as doing like status code 200. This is now going to create a test to test if status code 200 is what we receive. So I set that, and you can see now in test results, status code 200. Super easy. Then we can do, they've got some other templates here, and then you can basically just write JavaScript in here as much as you need. But I find that the templates are really helpful to get you started. So here, look at the time, this just sets you up to test the body of it for whatever you want. And I've got some examples of that over in here. By the way, this set of requests is available. It's at the very bottom of the repo, or somewhere in the repo. There's a link to be able to fork these requests, so you can take a look a little more in advance yourself. So let's see, get all Pokemon. We can look at the tests. So here I've got a test, and let's see, we're checking status code 200, and then we're looking for the JSON data, and we're expecting 151 Pokemon, because that's how many Pokemon there would be. I think that'll probably fail right now because I've added some stuff to the database. I have this handy little endpoint that just resets the database back to the original 151 Pokemon. So let's get all Pokemon and see what happens. Test results, 200, and we got 151 Pokemon because we did JSON data.length, just plain old JavaScript. Now, what's also very cool is I've put all of these tests into a folder, and this folder, you can run all of the tests inside this folder. So there's a run button up here. So this is going to do a series of tests. Actually, I'll show you another cool thing you can do with the tests. Is I want to test to make sure that it gives me invalid if there's no API key. So I'm using the pre-request script, which is going to basically take the API key variable. It's going to save it somewhere else. It's going to empty it out. So the request should get sent without an API key. And then in the tests, which gets executed after the request is complete, I have it take the API key from that temporary storage location and put it back as the variable. So this one, we should see a 400, and the body should say invalid API key. But then on this one, on this request, again, we should have that API again. So if we go to tests, oh, sorry, that's restoring the database. On this one, we should have the API key again, so we can again test correctly. So let's go to the API tests, and we're going to run this whole fleet of tests. So we hit run, and you can tell it to have a delay. I've been putting a few milliseconds in here just because I don't trust my server to be super performant. So we'll put 200 milliseconds between them. Lots of different options here about if you can save the requests or not. You can look through those on your own time. We're going to save the responses, and we don't have cookies, so I guess that doesn't matter. So we run the tests, and you'll see here, Postman is going to run all of them. And you can see here, no API key. We did, in fact, that worked. We restored it. There's no test there, so it's a little grayed out, and all these things. Oh, interesting. We did fail one test. So we should be getting an empty array here, but it looks like that's not what happened. Yeah, we're not going to go in and debug that at all. I just wanted to let you know that it's actually really easy to make a test, create a series of tests, and then run those tests with one button. So I can't tell you how many times I've written, API code, updated it, and then manually gone through and been like, okay, now let's send this request. Okay, great. Now let's send the next one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Does anybody have questions on anything so far? There's one last thing to kind of introduce you to, but it's pretty advanced topic. Angie, I think maybe you popped in a little towards the end of this. Is there something you wanted to, maybe I can review the beginning for you?
I wouldn't want to make you do that just because I forgot about this and I meant to be here. So if you have the time to, that'd be cool. But if you don't, I totally understand.
Okay. I do think we have the time. I'll just make the seniors, the senior, and maybe some of the staff aware of something called a mock server, which is pretty cool. It sets up a server for you, and you can use mock data. So it like creates this little URL for you. And if we go back to our collections in my Pokemon one, you'll see this little added thing. This is called like example data. And you basically add a route, which is our get all Pokemon route. And then if it'll load, this is the example data. So you can actually put whatever you want in here. And if we switch this to the mock server, I haven't tested this in a while, and we sent a request to that endpoint, it should send us back exactly the sample data that we put in here. Why is this handy? Well, if you're maybe developing a front end and a back end at the same time, and you want your front end to be able to like test out their code, but you haven't finished writing the back end, it might be really quick and easy to throw together a fake server with sample data that is what you think what your API should be returning. And the front end team can develop using that mock data, using an actual endpoint, doing actual HTTP requests. And then presumably once the back end is done, you just switch the host on the front end. Bada bing, bada boom, you've connected everything and it's all gone super smooth. So yeah, look into that if you're interested. And let's go back really quick and just talk about, right, so Postman, it lets you troubleshoot and create HTTP requests. So the first thing is you've got to create a workspace to work in. So when you start up, it'll ask you to create a new workspace. I made this test workspace just now. And once you're in here, you can't create anything until you have a collection. So create a collection. Collection is kind of like a folder. Once you're in here, you can either use the new to build something, or you can press the three dots over here to add a request. So we're going to make a GET request. I've got a running server on my computer right now. So the address for that is http localhost 3000/API/Pokemon. So this is going to create a GET request. Oh, actually, let me turn the authentication off so I don't have to deal with that. Comment that out, save it. So now we've created a GET request, which we've selected from the drop-down menu. We've told it to go to the host 3000 at the API Pokemon endpoint. We're going to send that, and you'll see that we can see the results of that request. So this is a really good way to test, like, oh, what does this API send me? If you want to know what kind of data you're going to get back, you can do this. You can also use this to test out, like, I'm not quite sure what parameters it accepts or how to do it. So you can add a query parameter here, which is a frequent way that APIs work. And we can say dragon. So now we'll send a request, and you can see it changes dynamically up here as you add that. And I happen to also know you would usually have to go to the docs to figure this out, but this also takes a path parameter. So you saw I added :number, and it automatically knew, okay, that's a path variable, and that's going to be something that can change. So we could turn this off. Now let's just get Pokemon 151, which is Mew. And there it is. So it's a really easy, quick and dirty way to test out an endpoint. And a lot of people don't know this. Over here, there's a little code icon. If you open that up, it will give you the code to create that request in a whole bunch of different languages and with a whole bunch of different libraries. So you can do native Node.js. I don't think I'd probably recommend like copy and pasting the whole thing, because it might not exactly fit into your code, but it'll give you a really good idea of what you're going to have to do to make that work.
So that code snippet on the side is like what you would put in your JavaScript for like sending and receiving stuff from the server.
Correct. So like you'll see over here, they've got JavaScript jQuery, which you've, I believe, worked with. So you can see here Ajax And here tells you like, oh, the settings object would need URL. The method is get. And like I said, I don't know if I would necessarily recommend copying and pasting this directly, but if you're in a pinch, it's a good place to go to, and you might help you understand like what are the various parameters you need to pass.
Yeah, it's also like a good template to like get started with it. It's pretty cool.
Yep. And so this has a ton of additional advanced features. You can create lots of different requests. My Postman is so slow right now.
So this is like its own application on your computer?
Correct. It does have a web interface. Yeah, so you just specify the method and tell it the URL. You can add authorization. If we go back to my other one, there's a kind of cool thing I like to make people aware of, which is environment variables. So this is really good for your API keys. So you don't need to add the authentication to every single request. You can just go to the folder or the collection, and the collection itself, instead of selecting a request, the collection itself can actually take an API key. And then using these double curly brackets, you can refer to an environment variable. And those are, you can see those up here. If you click on the eye, it'll open up what your environment variable are. I've already made a few. But you can see like in local, I've set, oh, there's no API key right now. Surprise. I've set a value here for the API key, and that gets put into here.
Colin, how do you set an environment variable?
Yeah. So you can create a new environment from the new button, and then those will show up here in your environment. All of this stuff is specific to your workspace as well. So all of these things live inside the workspace. So once we create one, you basically just get a bunch of rows, and it's just key value pairs. So if I need to add one, I can say like the Colin variable is going to be my name is Colin. And so now you should see if I were to change this to local and look at it, I guess maybe I need to save it. And then we were to look at it, you'd see Colin shows up, and I can refer to that anywhere in my requests as curly bracket Colin. So you could put that in like the body of a request if you wanted, but I found that mostly I use it for changing the host and the API keys. And with that, we're out of time.